Greetings, folks. Estuary here. Today's replay is from a brand new guest to the channel. This is Constantine IRB from the North America server, and Constantine has sent over this terrific match of himself sailing the premium tier 6 Japanese battleship, the Mutsu. This is a tier 7 standard battle on Estuary. There are no aircraft carriers, and there is only one destroyer per team. Now, Constantine's ship build, as you can probably tell, is a tad unique in that he has no upgrades. Constantine realized after I asked him for the ship build that he had not put any upgrades on his ship. And this is a good reminder that having a good game is more of a reflection of the capabilities of the player and less dependent on the ship build, whether that's missing upgrades or running a commander with no skills or lacking premium consumables and signals and so on. All of those things can help the gameplay be easier, but they're not the driving factor, in my opinion, in terms of having a good match. Now, this match is going to be interesting for a couple of reasons, and a reflection of the title of the video. Both the allies and the opponents are going to be spending a fair amount of time in the second half of the battle defending their own bases, including Constantine, who will be, obviously, like I said, defending his base. And it will also be a reflection of choices that his allies make, especially late in the battle, and the efforts that Constantine will need to make to, quote, cover the bases of choices that his teammates make. And most of them will be fairly self-evident, but I'll point them out as we go along. Now, looking at the tactical situation, something very interesting is developing here. So Constantine looked to move to the west side of the flank, west side of the map, where he had spawned. But most of his allies on the west side have elected to move into the middle of the map. And it's generally a good idea to try to stick with each other so that you can support each other, especially in standard battles like this. Going off and being on your own for most ships is generally a very bad idea. In fact, the Sinop, which is the only ally on the west side, is eventually just going to get focused out because in the same way that half of Constantine's team has moved to the east side of the map, more than half of the opponents have moved to the west, and with the Sinop being the only ship that they can see on the west side, he is eventually going to get focused out quite early in the match. Constantine's going to line up a shot here on this Algerie. We can see a number of opponents have also stayed in the middle of the map as well, and so there's going to be a lot of this sort of gunning as Constantine gets a nice citadel hit on the Algerie, taking out more than half of his health. But there's going to be a lot of shooting at each other between gaps in the islands or low points in the islands. And we're going to see a lot of this activity here over the next few minutes. Constantine's looking to try to get another salvo out here on the Algerie. Algerie takes some more damage, in fact, fairly significant salvo from, I'm assuming, one of the other allied battleships as Constantine gets the last shell in and finishes off the Algerie for his first kill of the game. Now, let's talk a little bit about the Mutsu as a ship, as things are sort of moving along here. For those of you unfamiliar with the Mutsu, she is based largely on the tier 7 tech tree Japanese battleship, the Nagato, with some key differences. So first of all, she has somewhat worse armor than the Nagato. She's squishier as a battleship, the Mutsu is. She definitely has worse AA than the Nagato. The Nagato is not known for having really strong AA in general, but the Mutsu is quite weak, and even weak for a tier 6 battleship. But they carry the same main battery armament, which are these 4 turrets of double barrels carrying 410 millimeter guns. And those are the biggest guns at this tier. For a long time, the biggest caliber at tier 6 was the Warspite at 381 millimeters. And then the Bayern came along, which is the tech tree tier-VI German battleship, which also carries 380 millimeter guns. And then later we had the Queen Elizabeth, obviously the tech tree British battleship, which is a sister, same class as the Warspite. And then later came along the Mutsu. In fact, actually, maybe the Mutsu came before the British battleships were released. I don't remember. But these are definitively the biggest guns at this tier. Okay, so coming back to the tactical situation, again, the synop that I mentioned on the west side indeed was focused out. The opponents continue to make their march up the west side of the map. The Allies have made a push towards down the east side. The Allied Hatsuharu is on the India line. I don't know whether he's just looking to keep things spotted and torp from behind, or did he go, I'm not sure. Obviously, he's not going carrier hunting because there's no carrier, but he's gotten clearly into the backfield. He might be in a situation that if he runs into the T-61, he could be in some serious trouble. The T-61 is the premium tier-VI German destroyer, carries hydroacoustic search. Its concealment is quite good. It has decent guns. It's a very well-rounded destroyer, and could give the Hatsu a real run for his money if the Hatsu were to run into the T-61. Right now, it just looks like he's trying to get some advantageous torpedo strikes on opponents that are in their cap. Now, looking to try to get a hit on the New York here. For those of you unfamiliar with what Constantine is doing here, he is briefly double tapping the M key, the mic key, in order to, not microphone, but the M key, to get to understand the relative position of the New York to the terrain. But now he's able to see the New York here. Now he's going to fire here at the waterline, and he's going to have a very disappointing salvo with only 2 shells hitting, and I think both both have penetrated the torpedo belt, but did not go further. So that was no damage. And I know a number of players, community contributors, and other folks have noticed that shots at the waterline, as of late, often go short. This seems to be a genuine bug, although Wargaming apparently denies that there's an actual flaw here, that things are working as intended. Unfortunately, this salvo is much better. He gets almost 8,200 on that salvo. But there has been pretty irrefutable video evidence of players firing shots at waterline, and those shots falling short by a considerable distance, by even a couple hundred meters. And Wargaming, again, seems to think that there isn't an issue. So that previous salvo, or the salvo before the previous one, was quite disappointing. But the last one was okay. Now he's going to fire on the Ashigara here, the ARP Myoko ship here. It looks like he aimed at tad high, because the Ashigara was, Ashitaka. I'm sorry, that is an Ashigara, is coming in toward him. So I think he aimed a tad high. He's going to, I think, fire next on the Fuso. The New York is going to get the Ashigara here in just a moment. As he fired some of his guns at the Fuso, and he did fire at the cruiser as well, but the New York did take him down. So looking at the tactical situation, the teams are even on both ships and points. However, the Allies have moved into the opponent's cap, and so the opponents aren't getting any points. And that's going to work to their advantage for a little while. But what we're going to see over the next few minutes is sort of a constant level of trading of ships and points. As in fact, the opposing Fuso is going to move into the Allies' cap here. In fact, he just moved into it. So neither team are getting points from their caps. In fact, the Allies just lost another ship, so now they're behind. And there's going to be, over the next, well, frankly, for the rest of the battle, there's going to be this sort of continuous trade of ships and cap contesting that is going to cause the lead between the two teams, to sort of waver. And that's going to make things, again, I think rather tense and frankly quite exciting in terms of how the game is going to turn out. Salvo out on the Gneisenau, quite strong salvo, another 8,000. Doesn't quite finish him off, but the Gneisenau is finished off by the Fiji. Now, Constantine and the Fiji here on his port side are going to turn around to go defend the cap because the Fuso is in the cap and he should be relatively easy to spot. In fact, Constantine's going to pop his airplane here to see if he can get visibility on the Fuso. And this isn't for when he puts the plane up, it isn't to get more range. He wants to be able to see the battleship try to get a reset on him. And then the Fiji is going to go with him. So the Hatsu is in the cap, but he has now just detected the T-61, and this is the point I was making earlier, that the Hatsu the T-61 is a significant threat to the Hatsuharu. Being a German destroyer, it's going to have hydroacoustic search. He's going to be able to flush out the Hatsu if the Hatsu drops into smoke. He also has a decent gun system. It's a very well-rounded destroyer, and so it's a serious threat to the Hatsuharu. Looks like the Hatsuharu is making his way out. Fortunately, we do spot the Fuso, and Constantine is able to get a reset. Now, Constantine was set on fire by the Fuso, but as far as I can tell, he only had one fire set, and he went and chose to damage control that. I don't know if that was just instinctive or did I miss and there was actually two fires, but that may have been a mistake. Now, then the other thing that's happening here is the Fiji is clearly intending to try to get a torpedo strike on the Fuso, but the way he's trying to do this, in my opinion, is going to be a problem. First of all, the Fuso is now sailing away from him. So the Fuso has the means to turn away. Secondly, the Fiji loses almost all of his health in a single salvo and then is finished off by the secondaries. He does get his torpedoes away and he fires them single file, but unless you're like basically have an assured strike, firing single filed off generally is not a good thing. As Constantine was able to finish off the Budioni that was over on the west side of his cap. And in fact, here Constantine is set on fire again by the HE slinging Fuso. Now, the Fuso here is actually making the most dangerous type of turn a battleship can make in a brawl situation. You notice that he is making what I call an inside turn, where his ship is leaning in a way that the red area of his hull, which is his citadel, actually comes above the waterline. And so you're able to fire below the belt and actually go directly into the citadel. The first part of Constantine's salvo did get a citadel hit. His second one, he did not get into the citadel, but he did get a couple more pens. Okay, so now I'm going to start getting into where I think frankly, mistakes are being made by the Allies. So the Trento, thankfully, has come back also to defend, which is good, but he sent torpedoes from behind Constantine, and that has restricted Constantine's movements. And so Constantine, although it isn't going to really matter here in terms of being able to take out the Fuso, and here we see the example of him using the torpedoes here to get the kill on the Fuso. Having the Trento send torpedoes from behind Constantine meant that he had very limited maneuvering options. And so players that sail ships with torpedoes, please don't do that. I mean, if you are in live communication with the other player, like on voice comms, I'm not talking about chat, and you tell them your intentions and they agree and they comply, then fine. Then, sending from behind might be okay if everybody agrees. But in most cases, doing things like that is generally a bad idea. It restricts maneuverability. Obviously, you have the chance that you're going to torpedo your ally. It's generally a pretty bad practice. Okay, so looking at the tactical situation, the Allies have actually made a pretty nice recovery here. It's a 3-on-2 situation. They have the lead. And as my regular viewers will know, when you're in standard battle, you have the lead. The better thing to do generally is to defend. You don't have to press anything. The Hatsuharu at this point should kind of sail away. He doesn't have to get any more strikes in, but unfortunately he is going to get detected again by the T-61, and the T-61 is very healthy. So there's a significant threat to the Hatsu. The Hatsu is actually quite low on his health. He is going to take a few shells. These torpedoes that we see that are going toward the New York are going to miss. There, the Hatsuharu takes another hit. So he's down to very low health. And then the other mistake that's being made here is, again, from the Trento, who is attempting to get salvos in on the New York, but he doesn't need to do this. Again, he's also quite low in health. The New York does not need to get a lot of shells on the Trento to finish him off. And the Trento, in my opinion, is making a mistake trying to press here. If they felt a need to have to put fire on the New York, let Constantine be the front to do that. And the Trento should not be exposing himself to fire from the New York. But in this case, there really isn't a need to engage. And obviously, Constantine's making some safe shots here because he's behind the terrain. In fact, he gets a pretty nice 4K chunk on the New York, and with his back guns and with his front guns, he's going to send out another salvo. This will not quite finish off the New York, but it will get the New York down to very little health. I think down to, only about 2,200. So there's no need at this point for the Hatsuharu, the Trento, or anybody at this point to directly try to engage. If the opponents come up, let's say up the middle, to try to put pressure on them, then they could look to finish them off. But there's no need to for ships to expose themselves at this point. Waiting for his guns to reload and for the island indicator to clear. He does get a few shells clipped. Unfortunately, this salvo is not going to finish off the New York. He's going to get just a couple of shatters. So again, that was an unsuccessful strike. This is the point at which the Trento makes his mistake. He attempts to back out to get shots in. He's made visible by both the T-61 and the New York. He attempts to smoke up, but between a shot from the New York and the T-61, he is taken out. So now the Allies are behind again, and there wasn't a need for that to happen. Now, this is a very precarious situation. The Allies have to make the play here because they have fallen behind. With the time remaining only a minute and a half, there isn't time for Constantine, I think, to try to sail around this large island that's directly in front of him to the west and then put fire on the New York. The time may expire, so he elects to go closer to the destroyer, which is the riskier move for himself. In fact, he is now proximity detected by the T-61. He's going to front guns out here on the T-61, and he's going to do something that's very interesting here. And I didn't talk to Constantine about this. I don't know if this was intentional or just luck. He's actually going to end up leveraging the shell of the Trento to protect himself from the torpedoes. The T-61, who unfortunately grounds, and Constantine gets his 4th kill with that strike. The T-61 was forced to send in a way that the torpedoes were going to miss, either by hitting the Trento's hull or simply fire behind Constantine. And as luck would have it, Constantine is able to avoid the torpedoes. Now, as his front guns have loaded, sends out some shells out on the low health New York, finishes off the New York for his Kraken Unleashed, and ends the game for his team. So very nice game. Devastating strike, Kraken Unleashed, fireproof, and Confederate 138, almost 139,000 in damage in a tier 7 standard battle on Estuary. So Constantine, excellent work in the Mutsu. Great recovery for your team, so very well done. Thank you very much for sharing this with us, and I hope everybody enjoyed the replay and the commentary. Please do leave your comments below. We hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.